Now let's talk about using Smart UV Project. So this is O5 Begin. We'll use this little guy as an example. We'll use his head. So let's come over to UV editing. And so what we want to do is have some sort of automatic way of unwrapping or laying this out, but we don't want to have to draw out the seams, let's say. So on something like this, we can have Blender create UVs based on the angles between faces. So if we have, for instance, the front of this face, you know, all these faces are within a very low angle tolerance of one another, but as you start to turn around the corner, that angle becomes more and more, and so you probably want to create some sort of a seam in some of those locations. And so what we can do is define an angle to use to be able to separate those out. So let's go ahead and select our faces here. Let's come over to Shading UVs. We're going to come down to Smart UV Project, and then there's an angle limit, island margin, which is the space between the islands, and then an area weight, kind of a weighting for the polygon sizes. So let's increase our island margin a little bit so we have some space between those. So maybe 0.1 or so. And then the angle limit, the higher number that you put in here, the fewer pieces that you're going to have. It can go up to 89 degrees. You might have some distortion with those. If you have a lower number, like 10 degrees, you're going to have more pieces because you're going to have more pieces that have that sort of variation. Whereas if you increase the number, you're going to have fewer pieces that are that far apart as far as the angle goes. So let's try something that's kind of a low angle limit, maybe 30 degrees. So you're going to separate things that are 30 degrees or more apart. So let's say OK. And you can see there's a bunch of pieces here. We do have some nice padding between here, but you can see how it's created all of those different pieces. Several pieces for the front of the head there, and then everything is kind of broken up, even down into these little pieces here. So that's really, I think for me, too many pieces. So let's increase our angle limit. Let's go up to maybe 60 degrees. Now you can see we're starting to get fewer and fewer pieces, where we've got kind of the whole side of the head. We've got the front, the back, and so we're starting to get fewer and fewer pieces, which is nicer when we're going in and painting textures. Let's increase this to the maximum. And if you add anything above that, it's going to default back to 89 degrees. Okay, so go ahead and add that. So now you can see that we've got very few pieces. We do have some strips here that we'll still need to do some editing on, but it helps us to really quickly lay out our geometry and our UVs without having to go in and manually add seams to it. So that can be found under UV Mapping, Smart UV Project, and then the settings that you're going to change are the angle limit, the island margin, and then the area weight also gives weight to the polygons of different sizes. And this last value is basically 0 to 1 weighting, and so it's at 0 now. If I increase that, you can see I can get fewer pieces. So you can play around with those settings, but that's kind of a quick way to get your UVs laid out without having to add your own custom seams. Okay, you can try it if you want to try it on the chest or the body plate here. You can do that as well. So the next thing we'll do is take a look at how we can create UVs for things like tubes and curving objects that other methods of creating UVs for might not give us the optimal result for texturing. So we use something called Follow Active Quads to help make those UVs much easier to work with. So we'll do that next.